Jinxed it. We
No,
will
just go stop. Just go back to the share screen and check the box for video and audio. I think that's the only issue. We see your screen, everything is working, but no sound yet.
okay. Just one moment, please.
Yeah,
Let's
take your time.
let's
We're
let's
not rushing. That's the joke I've been using lately. I mean, we're not in a hurry. If you're rushing or if you're in a rush, somebody could attack you. It's sort of a joke in a way, even though we work quite well with the Russians in the Second World War. Actually, they lost many more than many other nations in defeating this problem we had in Europe. Go ahead. Okay, are you hearing it, Alex? Because we're not.
for again, here we are.
It's okay.
Oh my God. Oh, we're gonna have to upgrade this system here. So
Let me play the disclaimer, and that way we can get on the road.
very sorry, Mark. Go ahead, please.
No, it's no problem. I don't have a problem with it, sharing it, and hopefully it plays for me. These things are been quite funny as of late. We'll turn this down a hair. Okay, let's make sure we're properly sharing. We are. Okay, and here we go.
Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Okay, and we want to welcome Alex and all his hard work and frustration that he went through today to bring you this presentation. So, Alex, we're going to turn it right over to you, and thank you again for joining us on a regular basis without missing, and to be here and to share more of this deep knowledge of the Kesh Foundation and the plasma science.
And thank you very much. Yeah, there was a change, so I'm going to have to do this kind of backwards here. So I will share the screen.
That's it. I was just
And
going to ask you
we'll
to. We
go
see your
back.
screen.
Okay, it worked. Thank you so much for everybody being here. This is the Kesh American Knowledge Team meeting, and it's been quite the week. Very important things are happening. And please remember, you'll be able to tell your children and your grandchildren, and God willing, bringing the Kesh Foundation knowledge forward, your great grandchildren. And so let's get into it. This is the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We're talking about advanced transmutation today. I'm going to introduce the subject of gyroscopic. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is December the 1st, 2024. This is the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. And as we go through, and we can see it's a continuation of other advanced series. And since we have so many new knowledge seekers coming up, we have to kind of clean up the way things are being done. And not only do we have to clean up our own house, but this planet is going to need a lot of cleanup. So these are causing a lot of concerns for us. One of the reasons we are knowledge seekers is because this is so important. And here we are still on the hesitancy highway. We understand it's the lowest energy state, that this is something important that we have to mention to people. And, you know, there's nothing we can sweep under the carpet. We just have to remember that we can't put the cart before the horse. There's a sequencing that has to go on. And people keep throwing all these road apples in front of us. And, you know, a balanced rider has to be balanced on the horse. And this is the main topic that we're going to have today, because as we're searching for outer space, we have to look for things that are spinning in control on the plasma highway to our little pie in the sky. We don't have to look for things that are spinning out of control. That has already been taken care of. But the new knowledge seekers should be introduced to book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation of Matter. Book number 2, The Structure of Light. And we have to understand that in the beginning, the neutron came before the atom. It was from the splitting of the neutron that we have the proton atom and electron atom combination. At the same time, we created the PM ticks, which is the ubiquitous energy that is passing through the vacuum of outer space. And of course, it is in outer space because it's non-visible and non-tangible. And so in book number 3, it explains this, because something that we haven't been able to explain in our life is the origin of the universe. And a lot of us pass through life without ever achieving that answer. And we've come to the point where we need to achieve that answer, because bringing one planet, one nation, one race for justice and world peace is an effort that we've been trying for 353 weeks in a row with Rick Crammon and the members of the Universal Council, because peace is the ticket to outer space. And, you know, we need to thank John Blevin for all his work with the American team. And hopefully he's helping us on the other side. I want to thank John again for all the years of support. So when we look at the basics of our understanding, most of us were growing up with the 10 Commandments. And of course, we revered the man who brought them to us. And we see there's another 14. Unfortunately, from my perspective, my point of view, I didn't understand how these commandments were delivered. And now I do. And I've gotten over the anger, because anger doesn't get us to the plasma highway. Anger keeps us from that. That's why we're on the transmission highway, because as we shake and rumble and pound the table, we create a frequency. And that frequency is only heard on this planet. It's not heard even when we go into the transition zone, because it's it can be done in both dimensions. So our goal is to get into the transmission highway, and the transmutation highway can be done on Earth. And we've seen that, and that's all part of the training. And this is the information that we have to convey to the new knowledge seekers. So our little pie chart here is our little piece of prejudice, because we are limited by the speed of light. That limits our transmission. But interestingly, the speed of light has a variable transition. And so the transition from what to what, and somehow when we can't answer that question, then we realize that we are disconnected from our source. And how far away is the source? And so we say, oh, well, the universe is light years away, isn't it? But while we're contemplating that, we'd like to have another piece of pie, and we'll bring another one today, right? But the real question is, well, why don't we just get the whole pie? And in fact, why don't we all have a pie? But apparently, that's not the way we can do things here. So right now, we have to make relationship choices. And so what we found is that even though we differentiate between transmission, transition, and transmutation, each of those being a dimension, each dimension of those has to have 3 dimensions. And so this is significant because now the X, Y, and Z axis is part of the transmission dimension. But likewise, it too is part of the transition dimension. And that's your duality. But then we get into the transmutation dimension, and something changes. And it never changes the message. It only changes the medium. So how does the message get conveyed? And this is what we're trying to do. So we have to understand that these dimensions are created through different energy levels. So when we talk about the matter state, and that's our little tiny piece of the pie, in relationship to the electron and the proton and the neutron, we're the electron, we're the little guys, and the neutron is the rest of the universe. So we have a sister universe, and that for us is our proton. And that's a good thing, because the way we run things, we need that. So we've been always trying to understand these spheres of influence. And so we use the surface of volume ratios to understand the different feeding dimensions and understand how we keep those feeding dimensions and create a feedback dimension. So the point of this whole thing, when we're talking about surface to volume ratios, is to understand that all 3 are feedback dimensions. All 3 are in operation all the time. And so we are the observers, the fudgers. And I say the fudgers because, let's face it, the pi is 3.14 and a bit and a bit. And so we're none of those feedback dimensions. Or are we? It all depends on where we focus our attention to. So the thing is, we can participate in these feedback dimensions, and we can participate in other dimensions. And how do we know that? Well, because in 1974, which was a long time ago, and I think we all have to envision in our minds, where were we? Because 10 years prior to that was a very important event in 1963, the assassination of the President of the United States. And so it was a very exciting time because there were a lot of new innovations. There were a lot of changes socially, financially, and militarily. But what was always in front of us was the world was at our fingertips. Well, I did not have the science of gyroscopes at my fingertips. I only found out about this recently. Why? Because I didn't travel in those spheres. So we've always been talking about relationships and how it's important to have balance. And today we're really going to focus on that because in the plasma science, the balance is between the magnetic and gravitational field forces. We call that a mag-grav. We don't really understand the mag-grav because for us, balance is only in one dimension. And that dimension, first and foremost, is the scientific community. And so there's a balance between the conservation of magnetic fields, understanding that we cannot see these magnetic fields, and it's a balance between the conservation of energy. And let's be clear about that. We can't see that either. So it's kind of strange that we are so focused on what we can touch and feel. So there's the other science, the spiritual science, discussing the spirit and the soul. And so we find that the spirit is the motor of the soul, and motoring is something that is very important for us because we all like to travel. And so how does the plasma science add to the knowledge? And so the first thing it has to do is bring the two sciences together and create this balance. And so when we say a balance, we think of a level playing field. And we actually don't have a level playing field. What we have is conservation of susceptibility. That means we are all independent plasmatic variables. But we all have a magnetical susceptibility and a gravitational susceptibility. And we have to understand that from our point of view, which is basically singularity, we have to take other things into account. And so the easiest thing is to take into consideration duality. Is that enough for us to maintain a level balance? And so when we look at the conservation of the plasma state dependency, we know that the matter-gen is a two-way street of equality. But when we say equality, what constitutes equality? Because if it is equal, I mean really equal, well then 1 would equal 1 or 4 would equal 4. But if we have a mag-grav condition on one side of the equation, do we need to have exactly the same mag-grav condition on the other side of the equation? Well, let's look at the practical application of this. Look at your life. Are your actions always equal? Is every trade that you do a fair trade? Is every relationship that you do a fair relationship with respect to energy input and satisfaction? And so we find that it's not. And why is it not? And should that bring us depression? Well, if we're only looking at singularity. But if we understand in the plasma science, we have the atomic state, the nanostate, and the GAN state, and each state is an order of magnitude higher. So that means when we find a balance, we could look at, say, a balanced field on the GAN state equal to a balanced field on the atomic state. So in other words, we can transcend the various energy states. Are we limited to these three states? Well, if we understand that all of these states are visible, we can see things, we can nanocode things, and we create GANs. Yes, we do. We have the cups of life. And it's so important now more than ever. They were brought out not as the cups of the pandemic, but plasmatic cups of life that reflected our emotional strength in our inner space. And we find that it's been weakened. And so we use the nanocoding process of the monatomic science to facilitate the production of GANs. So we are able to move from the physical state to the GAN state via the nanostate, and we are able to produce different cups. So we have a cup of the emotion and a cup of physicality. When we put the two together, so each cup is singularity, but when we put the two together, that's duality. And so now we have the cups of man. And aren't we very physical? And don't we need an emotional message to get us going? Right? Because otherwise we could be very physical sitting watching TV. But then there's creation. And so we have a different kind of duality, a twin cup connection. And so we used two emotion cup configurations and we connected them together. And we basically made them symmetrical. And what happens? 1 and 1 is 2. I thought we said 1 and 1 is more than 2. Where's the third one? Do you see it? Well, guess what? When we make the cups of life, we made cups of GANs. And we made CO2 GANs and calcium and zinc and copper and water and amino acid and all sorts of GANs, radiance manifested. And now we understand that we can do gold and even radioactive materials because every GANs on Earth represents the Earth. And we have so many different elements. So therefore, we have to understand that each of these elements manifested in their physicality, and they came from the plasmatic field forces. And the proof is, from those plasmatic field forces, we created the GANs, which means that the principal energy flow is a two-way transmission and a two-way transition. So that's your duality that creates your balance. And this is important because we're the water planet, and if we weren't in balance, there would be a lot of sloshing around. And so, in other words, our context has to maintain our stability, but our context has to maintain stability with others. We have to take others into account. So we emit what we are. And when we emit, words don't matter. What we are is a manifestation of emotion. And so when we're looking at the principal interaction, what is the most important action? And that is our interaction with the sun, which operates the same way. And so there's a two-way emission of intention, the intention of the sun and the intention of the earth. And when that comes into balance, and we're not saying equal, the equal is a representation of a balanced field. Then we can create a covalent bonding connection. That's where the balance stems from. And since we can't always see the factors that cause the balance, sometimes it becomes a point of conflict. So our skill set is going to be elevated through conflict resolution, looking at this point of conflict as being a point of containment, understanding that it's a point of covalent bonding. Why do these forces bring us together? And so we find that in many ways they are there to teach us a lesson. Well, what happens when that lesson is learned? Well, the lesson to learn is that the point of conflict is not necessary. Binding is necessary, but not at the expense of others. The binding is a self-serving necessity because only you can care about yourself. Nobody else really cares about you unless they are violating the laws of conservation. So in other words, as long as you're useful, we will protect you. Once you become useless, then we'll throw you on the scrap pile. So it becomes very important to be useful. Were we born to decide to be useful? Or did we predetermine that? Because what would be the reason for being born if the intention carried by the emotion wasn't designed to be useful? So we have to understand the new plasma rule where the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And then this binding zone develops a tensity. In other words, it has to be contained. And each binding zone then has a mass. And so there's a covalent bonding within the binding zone. So somehow this higher strength has to convert to a containment tensity. But because energy is always in motion, we can't stop it. We can't just put it in a bucket and have it sit there. In fact, if we want to contain this energy, we have to introduce rotation. And we know this as kids when we play with spinning tops. A top that is not spinning will just lie there in a horizontal position. But once we impart a rotating field on the top, it will align itself vertically and it'll spin very nicely and it'll be balanced. So we kind of resolve this anomaly where we understand that the balance between the top that is rotating and between the planet that is rotating creates a balance between these two fields. So we find that the energy from the one field is emitted as a magnetical force. The energy from the other field is emitted as a magnetical force. And when these two forces come together, they create this gravitational force. And so we see the top, we see the Earth, but this binding zone, this gravitational binding zone in the middle becomes non-visible if it's in total balance. But if we introduce other factors, then we can see other things happen. And so in 1974, as Eric Lathwaite was doing a demonstration on gyroscopes, and he gave it to a little boy, and he's trying to hang on for dear life because it's alive. And we find that the wheel that he's holding is heavier than he is. So he better hang on to it with two hands. But how does a young boy lift a wheel that is heavier than he is? How is that possible? And of course, he's superhuman, of course, right? Has to be. And so this is the beginning of the superhumans of the future and how happy we will be. So balance is what we're talking about. And once upon a time, we had a discussion about monorails, and I mean really monorails, one track, singularity. And the track was straight and definitely narrow. But we have to understand that that is a naval term. So when we travel the straights and narrows, those are the water straits and the narrow passages. And we need to be able to navigate those without you know, getting off track because we have a one-track mind. And how many times do we say, yeah, we'll get back on track? Well, shouldn't you stay on track? Well, if you don't lean into it, you'll fly off the track. So you have to kind of lean into the turn like a motorcycle rider. Well, how do you do that? Hard to do when you have the two tracks because the two tracks keep you level. So with the single track, you can kind of lean into it. So all aboard on this monorail. Well, how do we keep this monorail in balance? And so that's what it is. It has a tendency to tip over. So there must be some kind of opposing force. And so this balance is maintained through an external input. And so this external input and this demand for balancing has to work together in tandem, like teamwork. And so when we talk about gyroscopes, we talked about rotation. So in terms of rotation, there's a rotation on the x-axis. There's a rotation of the polarity on the y-axis. And there's a rotation in the field on the z-axis, which represents the strength. And the strength of that field is capable of lifting this dead weight. And so Eric Lathwaite was demonstrating in 1974. And so here is that dead weight, and it's on an axle. And it's not spinning. But if we impart a rotation so that it spins very, very quickly. Now, what does very quickly mean? So let's talk about over 2,500 RPM, for instance. So the gyroscopic strength increases. Right? And so there's a weight reduction. So this old man can lift this dead weight, just like the little boy. And so we see the monorail, it's leaning into a turn, and it's quite heavy. And I guess this is where the term hanging a right turn came from, because you better hang on to your seats there, folks. You don't want to slide off. So to understand this a little bit better, we have to understand that when we talk about balance, it isn't like a teeter-totter where you just balance in singularity. And if you impart a rotating field to it, or a rotation, it's not enough. Because as you can see, the idea being that if the road turns to the right, the gyroscope should turn to the left. So that takes care of one dimension, but it doesn't keep you straight, because you don't want to stay straight. You want to curve with the road. So maybe we need two gyroscopes, create opposing forces. And so you can have a balanced crossover. So we're not showing the whole pie here because we want to show the interaction at the point of contact in that crossover. So if the gyroscopes are pointing inward to each other, that would create a balance. But what happens if the forces are opposed? Well, now it's creating a gap. So what is the purpose of the opposing force? The purpose is to create a balance, but singularity is not enough because that just takes care of rotation. Duality is not enough because that just takes care of polarity. And so field strength has to be added. And so when we're talking about adding, the passengers, all they want to do is enjoy the ride and stay level. But that level has to take other factors into account because we're talking about the X, Y, and Z axis, and it's not stationary until you come into the station. So what makes it level? So it has to remain level even though it's in a curve. And as it goes through the curve, it has to go at a certain speed. So if it doesn't go fast enough, it'll fall over on the inside of the curve. So therefore, the level has to be higher. But if the speed is very fast, then the level has to lean into the curve more. But if the train pulls into the station and wants to be flat, even if it's on a curve, then you've taken out the speed, but you still need to require a level. So there has to be another balancing. And that's why the balancing is done in 3 dimensions. And so you have a leveling and you have a balancing where the left side and the right side work together in unity. And that unity is the 3rd dimension that you don't see because it's hidden inside the conductor's booth there. It's a gyroscope. And it's balancing in all 3 dimensions. And this is the point that we have to understand. It's how we can walk. When we move, even though the earth is rotating, we are not rotating. So those are rules for balancing. And so what we want to say is that these rules are applying in a Magravs state on the atomic level. And what we want to say is that those rules do not change. The level changes. We can go to the higher state, nanostate, the monatomic. Rules apply in the GAN state, the polyatomic. And those rules apply in the plasma state, the field. Now, we have to understand that there is no reason why those rules will not apply one step beyond. But the field has changed. And as such, there are effects that change. And the effect that changes is the elimination of the delay in consequences on the physical state. So that delay in consequences, and we've seen it in the Sanya conference where we could create gold GANs. We can create all the GANSs of all the elements in the periodic table of elements. It all depends on our prejudice. So that's a fact. And so when we're talking about the law of conservation and we say, well, path link and susceptibility, path link to what and where's the susceptibility? And so, there's an emission of a magnetical force and there's an emission of a gravitational force. One has to do with our attention and one has to do with our retention. The retention of what? The retention of the knowledge. And can you act on that knowledge all the time? And if it only depends on you and your physicality, you're in trouble. Because as we're trying to figure this thing out and doing these presentations and doing these seminars, the heart keeps working, the brain keeps working, and the organs keep working. And please keep working, because everything that we're doing is it interacts to create an emission of intention. So we have to consider the nearness and proximity. So with respect to our field focus in our physicality, yeah, we're very near. But maybe we have larger schemes. And so we have to consider the nearness and proximity with respect to those farther away. So there has to be some kind of bonding, doesn't it? And we understand the covalent bonding. So these are of fields that are contained within their tensity and with their mass. And so when we talk about tensity and mass, we're talking about matter state. But if we understand the rules of matter state science, and if we see that we can transcend the various fields, the various energy states, and whether we go and transfer from one state to another by going up, which is creation, or by coming down, which is decay, in all cases, we are balancing the wishes of the Creator. So our intention becomes the plasma vision, and that is in a field. And that field has no containment. And those are the things that we have to understand, how we can take those rules and go one step beyond, but one step beyond in terms of creation, and one step beyond in terms of physicality. And the reason we need to do this is because we have limitations. And those limitations are based on rotation. So when we look at the rotation of this planet, we find that it increases the gravitational force. So it's offsetting. It's not equal, it's balanced. And so depending on the energy input from each dimension, they all have to balance out, and they all have to balance out together in teamwork. And collectively, they increase the gravitational force within. So that gravitational force that's in the monorail will be equal and opposite with respect to the monorail and its containment, equal and opposite to the Earth's gravitational force. So the gravitational force is dependent on the point of view. And we find that the gravitational force increases with pH. And so we know that alkaline is in a higher pH, which makes alkaline gravitational. And so as we've been discussing and looking at the introduction of other dimensions, and we see that we have a nonlinear twinity relationship, and that it's slightly curved. And if we look at the relationship of the gyroscopes, which are operating in rotating fields of 3 dimensions, we see that there's a nonlinear trinity. And a nonlinear trinity allows us to go from field strength to field strength. and they have to maintain in balance. And so they can't just go one way together and one way together the other way, because there's no balance in it. So there has to be a balance all three dimensions. So when we're trying to understand the gyroscope, we have to understand that our positioning can be in all the four z-axis transmutation quadrants. So not only can we go a little bit left and a little bit right, but we can go a little bit forward and a little bit backward. And by the way, we can go a little bit up and a little bit down. And when we say a little bit, that means we can do combinations. And once we do these combinations, well, guess what? We have a periodic table of elements. And then guess what again? We have 8 billion variable, independent souls working on this planet. And why are we here? Because there's an infinite number of souls who are counting on us. In other words, we're part of that community. We're part of the transmutation community. And so our range transition transcends the z-axis transmutation dimension. And what we're concerned with, the laws of conservation, what they do is they govern the covalent bonding attribute. And this attribute, yes, it requires the gravitational intensity and mass, but more importantly, it can transcend the various energy states and the various energy levels, because the rules that apply to the gyroscope apply in all energy states. We have to understand that not only do we want to transcend and transmute, but the rules have to do it the same way. And so the rule that we ignore is the rule that created us. And so the soul of the man, which is what created us, cannot be abandoned. So this is why we have new choices, and it's here now. We're in the post-March 15, 2024 era. We can have a new selection process. And so we're looking at our bountiful space we call Earth space, which is heaven. And we want to understand outer space, which is part of the transmutation space. It's only a reflection of our inner space, which is the graceful space. And so we have to question, is that the graceful space? Why? Because we're seeking gravitational stability. That's why. We know that the gravitational stability is a confirmation of how we arrived here, because the hydrogen says so. It shows us an emission spectrum in color with a unique fingerprint that is a gravitational matter state physical representation of the gravitational confirmation of the convergence of forces coming from the magnetical field forces of the sun interacting with those of the earth and interacting with those of the universe. And they transcend all of the orders of magnitude, whether it's nano or pico or gans or plasma or the soul cornerstone. All of these are just channels for the emission of intention. And the emission of intention rules do not change. And so if there's a problem of transcending the various dimensions, then we don't understand the rules. So when we're looking at the transmission spectrum, we have to understand that there is a surface superficiality in our physicality, and there's an internal substance, which we call the plasma substrate. So the surface represents the internal, And that creates the balance between the gravitational and magnetic field forces. And what we're looking at, our point of containment, which we're going to discuss in more detail shortly, is the plasma containment, the plasmatic interaction within this containment. And unfortunately for us, we're bound by the limitations of the visible light spectrum. And it's so beautiful. It's in color, but we understand that we can go one step beyond into non-visible light. Well, now we understand as knowledge seekers that we can go one step beyond again. All we have to do is understand the rules, how to understand that the speed of rotation affects the transmutation transition, right? There are many points on the perspective scale. And so it's hard to believe over 100 years ago, we were looking at the new travel technologies, planes, trains, and cars. Was it new technology or was it just amusement? Well, maybe we're running into the same problem with our current space show. Maybe it's novel, maybe it's fun, maybe it's amusing, or maybe it's a matter of life and death, because there are many points on the field strength of the dove. We're talking about the pH of peace. And so we've been trying for the next couple of months to do the nutrition and wellness transmutation test, because this is very important, especially in times of crisis. But is that the only time that we have to resort to the universal laws? Why do we have to wait for a crisis or disaster? Why can't we move forward? And so we're inviting research teams from around the world to understand this, because denying the existence of the plasma science is really denying your own existence. And so for 566 weeks in a row, we have been bringing forward the Knowledge Seekers workshops to get this message across, that there are limitations of nuclear science, and we're transcending those limitations because they are restricted to the matter state nuclear science. And we're talking about the greater oneness, the universal science. Thank you very much. I am missing something. Oh, one moment, please. Let me see if I can find it. You know what? We're going to end it right here. Thank you very much for allowing me to present.
Is that a missing? You're missing a background, Alex? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, I'm missing a background.
That's okay. I think we've had enough ups and downs in a way, although we did see it through, so that was good.
Well, it's the message, not the medium. Thank you all for allowing me to present.
All right, let's see if anyone has any questions for Alex. So if we put the magrev on a spinning wheel, should it become weightless? I don't think so, but it may lose some weight or feel like it has lost, but I don't think that's the way the knowledge seekers achieved a floating magrev. But it does have some ability to, again, feel like there's a weight loss there, the spinning. And maybe that's what he's talking about. Once you get the fields spinning by doing it properly, you do get that floating action or weightless sort of action. I haven't achieved it.
Mark,
So let's see if, yes, if anyone wants to make a comment, ask a question, what
Yeah,
are,
put it out to the floor, please. Yeah.
yeah. Over to the participants.
Okay, Mark, what I would like to say is you just made a statement, and if we put the maggraph to a rotating field, how did you phrase it? Would it become weightless?
No, for example, what you were showing with the weight on the pole and how the young child could handle that, even though the weight was heavier than he was. It
Yes.
created sort of a weight reduction, but I don't think that's the way. But perhaps by interaction of fields on these coils, it does start to float if you can get those to interact and create that sort of, again, I'm not sure how that is achieved. I haven't actually, until he mentioned floating maggraphs, I had never heard anyone even speak of a floating maggraph.
Well, this is the point I wanted to make today, was that the rules that apply to this gyroscope apply to the energy transfer in this planet. The same rules. So we only see the rotation of the gyroscope, but we can't see the rotation of the field. We can see the gyroscope before it rotates, right? It's just dead weight. But once we start to rotate it, then magic happens, right? So not only does the strength increase, but the weight reduces. And this is the point. If we can do this in physicality, which the physicality is a manifestation of the plasmatic reality, then therefore the plasmatic reality must also have this attribute. Just because we cannot see the field, and therefore we cannot see if the field is rotating, what we have to understand, because energy is always in motion, and it's the motion of the energy which creates the containment of the field, then that field has to be rotating to maintain its containment. And in the process of rotating, it then has to emit energy and absorb energy to keep rotating. So the field itself becomes gravitationally stable in that process, because if it doesn't rotate, it's just going to basically evaporate. There's nothing to gravitate to. There's no field to discuss. There's no balance in it. So when we're looking at, for instance, the bringing together of these opposing forces, which creates a balance on the one level, and that's okay if you're going straight, but if you make a turn, where's the balance field? There isn't one. So the balance, which is gravitational stability, is only in one dimension. Now, what I'm saying is the Earth is gravitationally stable in 3 dimensions. So if you want to maintain gravitational stability in relationship to the Earth, you have to transfer the means, the ways and means of achieving that gravitational stability to your present structure. And so that's what we've done. We could create, with the gyroscope, we can create a balance field on the X, Y, and Z axis through the rotation, and that rotation creates a stability on each axis. And once you have the stability, look at this train. Look how big it is. Look how floppy it is. Look how many people. So people come on and people come off. So there's a weight balance change. There's a transfer. And, you know, we're not using this technology with our, shall we say, civilian practical means, but we are using it in our planes. This is how they navigate. This is how they make balance. This is how they know about their altitude. And unfortunately, this is how we're using it in the missiles as well. Because when we send a missile, there's no pilot on there, is there? And yet the missile has to know which way is up. Because if it doesn't know which way is up, God help you.
And obviously, there's a lot of rotation going on that we're not aware of. If every plasma and every atom has its own black hole, there certainly must be a tremendous amount of rotations going on, even though they're below our conscious understanding of it. We're sort of understanding it. So there's a lot of vortexes all around us, within us. And these atoms and plasmas, again, pull energy in, give energy out to confirm their existence. This is just a natural process. But how, again, I'm not following on the magrev and how this ties into creating a magrev that can elevate or become weightless. And again, I keep going back to the magrev as us. Randy put something in the chat. Randy, what's the YouTube link you've put there?
That is the lecture of that Giroscopic showing his gyroscope. Where the
Okay.
Is in and everything.
Of what Alex was showing.
Yes.
Okay.
It's what, about an hour long. In 1974. They don't expect high quality.
You're a little faint.
I said, don't expect high quality because it was done in 1974. It's his lecture that he did. Does it say where it was? No, it doesn't say where it was.
Mm-hmm.
But Mark, you see, the point is, we believe what we see. And we see this single track train. And it's hard to believe. So if we depend on what we see and what we touch, and even people are writing on it, it's confounding to understand why we're still disbelieving. Which just shows you how ingrained the knowledge on this planet is with respect to the limitations that have been imposed on that knowledge. So when we see something like this, well, it's kind of a magic show, isn't it? But, here is a practical application, for instance. So we don't see gyroscope trains, but we do see gyroscope planes. So, why is there a limit, to this type of thing? Why are we being denied access to this advanced technology? Because it shows us how things work. And that's what life is. Life is for learning to learn how things work. And so this is the point.
Well, again, it's back to control. In other words, if I have some help on the farm and they know how to ride a horse or drive a car and there's horses and cars available, they may get in it and drive away. because I've sort of been maybe abusing them, underpaying them, overworking them, and the rest. So this is what it's all about: the loss of control by certain groupings, small groupings, but powerful, as we see it, groupings. It's the loss of control. Again, if you can feed yourself, there's not much need for a supermarket or a farm. And again, it applies to energy and it applies to travel as well. So this is why the cork has been on, not allow this to be uncorked in a way, to keep you down on the farm after you've imagined Paris or even seen it. At least that's the way I'm looking at it. It's just too much freedom for people to, or they think it's too much freedom for people to handle in a way. That's why they put gates on cattle farms and sheds and the rest of this. And if anyone learns, or any of the cattle or the sheep learn how to open the gate, then that sheep has to be eliminated because he will teach the other sheeps. And then we won't have control of our stock, so to speak. So I think it's the same with us. But again, it's going to happen regardless. We're doing many of these things unconsciously, but now we're bringing it into a deeper understanding and be able to work it out with the help of system assist, as I like to say.
Well, let's remember, Mark, the most important thing I'm trying to convey here is that our balance within our three dimensions is dependent on external forces, seen or unseen. And that's the message. And thank you all for allowing me to continue presenting.
Right. I thought, oops.
Balance, Mark, and fly out of the room.
Did you pull the plug on your microphone? Mark, you turned your microphone off.
Okay, I thought Randy had his mic open for a minute there. I was thinking you heard some feedback. I think I opened two mics at the same time. That's why we got that little feedback. Or unless somebody is listening on speakers, maybe that would affect it too. But yes,
Now, you know, that's an interesting point you just brought up. Two mics cause feedback, right?
You want me to demonstrate it again?
No, are these mics the same?
No, one's on one system computer and the other's on an iPad.
Okay, so one is not like the other one.
Well, it's two separate systems connected to the same location.
Yeah, but they're different mics.
Yes.
One mic is on one system,
Yeah.
and there's another mic on the other system, but it's not like the first mic.
Right.
There's only one on one system and one on the other system.
Correct.
And so when you take one plus the other one, and when they're all both open at the same time, you get feedback.
Correct.
What a demonstration.
Well, it happens kind of often, I think, sometimes. Or if somebody's listening through speakers, I think that happens as well sometimes, depending who's talking or how that works. Again, I don't understand these systems that well.
Mark,
yes.
you just mentioned that there are two feeding dimensions. The mics are feeding you information and you create feedback.
Right, if both channels are open, correct. And
right.
I start speaking.
And that feedback is going to continue as long as the two mics are open and continue feeding.
Yes, it does appear that way. It's almost like that mirror effect where you can hold up that mirror and see so many images of yourself fading off into the distance. One mirror into another, let's say.
And yeah, so what I'm just saying to you is that one mic plus one mic is more than two mics, because now you created a feeding dimension, which is supposedly coming from another mic, isn't it? And you are the observer, and you're trying to figure out which dimension you're listening to.
Right.
Oh, anyway, it's just your timing is absolutely excellent, and I thank you very much.
Okay. I'm not trying to get feedback on the computer, so I'm trying to get a feeding going here plasmatically, more or less. Randy, what did you say you thought? Oops. Randy, oh yeah, okay. Randy, you said something about you wish you could get a hold of bottles of.
Yes, those bottles that Mr. Kesh
Come
showed-
closer, please.
Those bottles that Mr. Kesh showed in the exhibition in 2020 are the best bottles I've ever seen for demonstrating GANs. And I've looked everywhere. I can't seem to find them. So he must have a special supplier. Those bottles exactly.
Oh, those, yeah, okay. Yeah, they again, they may be something special for the Kesh Foundation, or it could be something in the scientific realm, or it could be a liqueur type of bottle where they were able to find its source. I don't know, but yes, they are very long necked, aren't they?
Very long. These usually the long neck ones are maybe, 2 or 3 inches. Those are almost the whole size, almost the same distance as the bottom of the bottle.
Right, and I think they do market some of these to private scientists and other things. I think some of these are in the thousands or hundreds of dollars per container.
And I seen in the Brazil one they had bottles like that. So they
Mhm.
maybe they were on loan from the foundation too.
Yeah, yeah. I think we'll be seeing more glass works in the future, or other containers, other type of containments, perhaps, rather than plastic, as we start to become more aware of this. But that's a beautiful demonstration for someone who wants to, again, show the technology, probably take some pictures, get some feedback to see plastic being moved from the energy state into the matter state. Again, another phenomenal demonstration of a transmutation. And of course,
I do remember.
Yep.
I do remember from one workshop, Mr. Kesh said in certain conditions the energy field was better for certain ganses from a plastic container than a glass one. So that's quite interesting. But I think that had to do with what type of plastic it is. There's so many different variants of plastic.
Yeah, he mentioned about the CO2 being stored in plastic was not a problem, but I thought he said the other one should be in a glass type of container. There's a lot of these little things with this understanding and the science that comes into play. And of course, to become a master at it takes a long, long time. But we're on our road. We're on our way.
Please consider something.
I've got some Cup 1 in some cryogenic tubes. They've been out in Canadian winter for 3 years now. No cracks, no nothing. They've been outside all that time. So, and that's quite a special plastic.
Please consider that plastic contains carbon, and so CO2 has carbon.
This is Cup 1. Oh, okay.
And the hydrogen, the CH bond in the plastic.
Right, but the CH bond is the precursor for all the elements. So, in the process of creation, it also is a process of decay. They work in two directions. So if you're looking at for gravitational stability, so you want to, shall we say, break the transition bond. And so you want to put them in something that is also gravitationally stable. So the GANS within the bottle has its own stability, and the bottle has its own stability. And you know that the glass is very stable because it's made of silica, which is part of the Earth's crust. And we know the Earth is pretty stable, in many ways, more stable than we are.
Right. And I remember at one point he said he preferred glass and because it has a show of strength, some sort of strength about it. Not that there must be something more than just you can't push it like you can plastic. but I think that was around the Cup of Life time, 2020, January, in that period, probably, where he said he prefers glass to make it in because it shows strength. And I'm not exactly, many times when he says something, I wonder how to interpret it.
Well, doesn't this look like a regiment of soldiers?
Yes, and sometimes what he said is you just think these bottles of Gans are arranged in a certain way. But I know in this exhibition, he said he would sit on the other side of the room. You know, he blamed the maid for moving them around in different positions. But he would watch as people, unknowingly, of course, as people walked by this table, whether they would bend or what sort of reactions of their physicality would happen. Again, he didn't go into details, and this is what we see a lot of times with Mr. Kesh, where we think he's looking for one thing and he's actually looking for something else, like in the pig trials in China with the swine flu. Everyone thought he was there to deal with the flu, but he said he was there, he was trying to actually revive the digestive system of the animal, and correlating that to when you go into space and how the digestive system will sort of deteriorate in a way because it's not being used as much. And if it could be revitalized once you came back into the matter state. And he said it could be. I think that's one of the things they found in the swine flu in China. And of course, we don't hear much about swine flu in China anymore, as indicated. Anyone else want to ask a question, raise a point? All right. Well, Alex?
I think we want to bring peace to this planet, and we need to do this now.
And again, that's not the end all of the development. That's just the next step in getting to the next step, is to create this permanent peaceful condition on this planet. And it seems like we have a long way to go, but things can change rather rapidly, especially when other systems are going to be activated or put in place, or are in place, as we see with the sun and the aurora and the energies coming from that. So it may be another, as he said with the cars, the hovering car. He said if it was up to me, you'd have that flying car in 6 to 12 months. But if it's up to the governments, God help us. So again, it can go quick or it can go slow. But he's normally on the step by step. Slowly, we move into this process. I think it's to allow other systems and other structures on this planet to accommodate for what's here and what's taking place, rather than just to whip it on everyone in a sort of a shock therapy type of manner. Anyone else would like to have a go with Alex? If you're tough enough.
Am I tough enough?
I meant the questioner.
I question myself.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Well,
Yeah. I have a question about the display on my cell phone. I have a larger picture with Ganses and then a smaller one with whatever principle of energy flow. And then I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 little pictures, which makes the big picture rather small in the space on my cell phone, which is already small. Is that how you have it all displayed?
If you're talking to me, I only
Yes,
display
madame.
one slide at a time.
I think she's talking to all the little thumbnails you have on the bottom, which you usually don't have. And then we see the picture of the GANS bottles and then another picture up in the right-hand corner. I think he had to sort of change his presentation around today. It's normally not like that, but that's just part of his PDF presentation.
Oh,
As
you have got to be kidding. Has
no,
it been like that all the way through?
yes,
Oh,
that's okay. Again, I think Randy mentioned it, but I didn't say anything because I thought perhaps you being on a different system or something that you couldn't get it to coordinate. So it wasn't a problem for me. I mean, if you enlarge, well, if you can enlarge to a full screen picture, yeah, we see the principal energy flow in the upper right-hand corner and some of the other backgrounds or slides for the PDF on the bottom.
so
But I don't
I
think.
should have done this.
Say again, please.
Oh, that didn't work. How come that didn't work? Oh, you know what? Are you kidding? Why is this not working? The share screen is all messed up again.
Yeah. Well, again, it's usually not the arrow, it's usually the Indian. Although Zoom has been responsible for some of these updates not being ready when they were supposed to be ready in certain countries, as Rick had informed us that not all countries had their Zoom update, or Zoom didn't have updates ready in different countries. So this is where people, if you couldn't update, you couldn't join the meeting. And so that was sort of a catch-22 at that point. No problem. We'll work
Oh,
through it.
yeah.
It's just another transition. You think this is a big transition?
What a day. What a day. We've spent almost 40% of the meeting just trying to figure out the technical difficulties today. Okay.
Okay, anyone else want to bring any other messages, information, sharing?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't
Show us your floating mag graph, perhaps? Or maybe you don't have to see it.
She's not changing.
And I'm gonna
What happened now? You're gonna take it back? Oh no, you're
no, I was gonna say I'm gonna try and test after this meeting if we can get into that room with using the English KF host, which I tried, but it didn't work. But I'm gonna try it again and I'll message you later.
well, you know what I'm gonna try? Can you just
Sure.
no, let's not try anymore. Let's
Okay.
bring this meeting to a close.
All right.
And we apologize for all the technical difficulties, but I hope the message got through. And that's what we have to focus on. And let's focus on the positive things and bring peace to this planet, because that's what this is all about. So if we can understand the practical application of if we can understand the practical application of the plasma science and bring it for the peace and prosperity on this planet, then we have lots to look forward to. Thank you so much, everybody, and thanks, Mark, for doing what you do and leading us into this wonderful future. Over to you.
Okay, and I finally figured out how to put two pictures on the same screen. We want to thank you all for being here and helping to deliver. See, now I just got a message that I was muted. but I'm not muted. So yeah, I think this system has to settle down, whatever's going on in the background. Maybe all of it's not complete in its upload, or they found a glitch. It wasn't fully tested. I don't know exactly, but there's been some issues, and mostly on Zoom side. But we want to thank you for pressing on. Again, this can be a bit frustrating, and it's not a day job, and you need some perseverance. As we see with Mr. Kesh, who's been pushing this and learning our ways and how to transfer this knowledge for quite a long time on this planet, and has again worked the last 40 years in this technology to bring it to the point it's at, and all the other things. So we want to thank you for being here and carrying a small piece of the very large carpet, enough room for everyone. And of course, we see the three wise men, the thinking correctly, acting correctly, and doing correctly, your thoughts, your actions, and so on. And then, of course, the other slide, may you be proud of the work you do. May you be proud of the person you are, and may you be proud of the difference you make. I think our work is correct and forever. So this is why working in and around the foundation will give you that, in a way, satisfaction of knowing your work is correct and forever, because this is a process that the universe and the universal community has put into motion in a way and planned out for centuries. So this is nothing happening by accident or by coincidence. It's all planned. And yes, we are resisting to a way. I'm not talking you as an individual, but structures on this planet. But again, we know the creator never loses, and it will be delivered as promised. Timing will be another factor, and it all depends on how governments and others start to pick up this beautiful flower of peace and move with it. But I think more and more, the more time goes on, the more things Mr. Kesh is doing in the background and getting ready for the point where there'll be major releases of this technology in so many different areas. People won't even believe probably they're still on planet Earth in so many ways. Where did all these technologies just appear or just come out of the closet? But more and more we'll show them, and how it's done and what was done, and there'll be a lot to understand, and there'll be many books to be opened as well. I know the problem with disappearing scientists, not that they've gone off into another dimension, but they've been eliminated. These books will be opened as well. So there's many books, not only the religious books, but many other books will be opened up step by step, I think. But the technology is certainly there, and our position is to use our energy side to do the work that we didn't realize we could do, and then to move that into the other understandings in a way, if I could put it that way.